Hi, I'm Don Minasi. I'm a jazz musician, professional musician. I've been a professional musician since I'm 14 years old. That's when I got my union card in New York City. I was sent a series of questions, and one of the questions was, how did I get into jazz? I think I first should say that I wanted to play the guitar from the time I was 4 years old. Would watch cowboy movies, and they would play the guitar, and I fell in love with the sound of the guitar, and then I had a cousin who played the guitar, and I begged my father to get me a guitar. And finally, when I was 7 years old, he got me the guitar. And he had this guy come to the house for lessons. After the second lesson, I wanted to quit. I hated this guy. I didn't understand the thing he was teaching me, and the truth is, he was a very bad teacher. But I stuck it out for 2 years. And in the last week of those 2 years, he saw I wasn't paying attention, so he smacked me. That's all my father had to hear. He was gone. So I had the summer off. I was very happy. And then he found a teacher in the neighborhood by the name of Joe Gianelli, who lived about 10 blocks away. And I went to see him. I fell in love with Joe. I was with Joe for 5, 6 years. He was one of the most nurturing people I ever met. I never brought him in a bad lesson. I went through the whole no bass system. If people, guitar players, know, you'll know what that is. So the thing is, so I studied, and he used to play jazz. On He would give me a new tune a week besides the regular lesson, and he would improvise, and I would say, "What is that?" And he says, "It's jazz." I said, "Well, how do you play that?" And he said to me, "It comes from the heart." Well, I said, "Oh, I thought someday I'd be struck by lightning and I could play jazz." Little did I know. So I, uh, I when I went to high school, I joined the big band. It was the dance band. All these guys were into jazz, and we would practice so much that we would practice outside of school at somebody's house. And one rehearsal we had at my friend Mike's house, Mike Simonetti. I got there early, so he put on a Johnny Smith record, and he played the album Moonlight Vermont. I had never heard guitar played like that my whole life. The sound, the technique, the improvisation, it just was incredible. So I went out. That's the first jazz record I ever bought. After that, I bought every one of Johnny Smith's records. I bought Cannonball Adderley, you name it, Horace Silver. I just kept filling my record collection with all the great players of the time. And when Johnny Smith was playing at Birdland, I saw it in the paper, and I begged my father to take me. I was 15 years old. He took me to Birdland, and I sat right in front. And right then and there, I knew that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I think my father knew it too, and he was very disappointed. But and then I thought it was time to move on to another teacher, and I found another teacher. I called a whole bunch of guys: Jim Rainey, Mundelo. None of them would teach me, but they recommended Sal Salvador. So I went to Sal. Sal was a very famous player. He started late in life, but he became an instant star. He was that good, and he I started with him, and he didn't teach me how to play jazz. He didn't teach me anything about harmony and theory, but he did get me to know the guitar inside out. And I practiced. By the time I was 15, during the summers, I was practicing 12 hours a day. And then during the winter, when in school, I would practice 6 hours a day. So, and then when I was 19, I became a full time musician. And I would practice 6 hours a day. And then at night, I would play 6 hours a night. There was so much work in the 60s. When I got out of high school in 61, by 1962, I was playing full time. There was so much work that I kept myself busy and three other guitar players. That's how much work there is. Of course, now it's not that way. So I just kept practicing, learning and learning. And since no one was teaching me anything about chord substitution, chord harmony, I taught myself. One of the great things about that time was when I was in high school at Bergman, they had like a gallery in the back for kids, called a peanut gallery. And you could go in as a kid, 15 years old. You pay your fee to get in, which was, I don't know, about $3.50, $4, and you would buy a Coke for another $3.50, $4, and you could watch the greatest people in the world play jazz. Originally, I went there for Johnny Smith, but then I ended up hearing Horace Silver, Quincy Jones with his big band, the jazz, you name it. Wayne, Billy Eckstein singing. I heard everybody. You name it, I heard it, and I realized then and there was more to playing jazz than just scales. The way that's how Johnny Smith played. He played a lot of scales, a lot of arpeggios. His chordal harmony was great, but there was more to playing jazz, and those guys were doing it, and they were pushing the envelope, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I, and a very quick story is when I first went to South Salvador, he told me to play a C scale, and I did. But I played it as a jazz swing. Boo, boo, doo, boo, doo, boo, doo. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm playing a C scale." He says, "No, you have to play straight eights." So, because that's all I knew, it was jazz raising because that's what I listened to. So I went on, and I became a musician, a working full time musician. You name it. I did shows. I did singers. I worked with a lot of singers when I was a kid, and that was a great experience because I learned to transpose instantly and playing different keys. Everything I did, I was to improve myself. Even when I went on a club and played in a club, I would play and I would sit in the corner and just wait to play again. I wasn't interested in meeting and socializing or picking up good. I just was there to play, and that's my whole life was based on playing. So, fortunately enough, I was heard by somebody. I was I must have been about 32, 33 years old, and he told me I should be recording. And I said, "Well, I don't know how to do that. I didn't know anything about recording, you know." And he said, "Well, you should go to Blue Note." He had a friend at Blue Note. I called him. He said, "Make a demo." I made a demo, and it took 2 years. And I finally got into the studios after 2 years. And it took another year or two for it to get released. My first record was When Joanna Loved Me. And then they flew me out to California to do another record called I've, I've Been Here Before. So I have a feeling I've been here before. So I went out to California. I was not too happy with that kind of recording because to me it was very commercial. It's not where I wanted to go. I was already writing tunes that had the tendency to lean on the outside, but that's what they wanted. And of course, they did not promote, and I complained, and they let me go. And I was very happy, but I left with a very sour taste in my mouth about recording in the music business and the jazz business. So I taught mostly. I did other kinds of gigs, every kind of gig you could think of, shows, off Broadway shows. I composed books. I taught. I did all of that. And then in 1999, a friend of mine, Jay Rosen, said, "You've got to record again, Dom. You have to record, especially the kind of music you're playing now." I says, "I don't want to be bought." He says, "No, no, just make a demo with me." So I made a demo, and he sent it to Bob Roosh at Cadence Simp Records, and he accepted. At the same time, I was playing with Blaze Sawola. We had a trio, and Blaze recorded and sent it to Bob, and Bob said, "Well, let's uh, let's record you." So 1 week I went up to record with my trio, and the following week I went up to record with Blaze. So from all that time, from 1978, 79 to 1999, I did not have a record out under my own name. I did play with other people in recordings, but I didn't have anything. So that was a long period. That was 22 years. So after that, uh, I got in touch with Jim Heigl, who said you should have your own record company. So my wife and I started CDM, Carol Dom Minasi. That was the name of the record company. And I did Taking the Duke out, which I thought, well, she said, "Why don't you play it the way you want to play it?" Because I was on gigs and I played with a lot of well known jazz guys in the 70s and 80s. And I would start to do things like take satin doll and tools like that, and start to go for very very outside, and they would look at me and say, "You can't do that to Duke Ellington." And then, so so I had to play very very straight ahead. So Carlson, why don't you play it the way you want to play it? So I recorded taking the Duke out, and I thought that would be the end of my recording career. But actually, it took off, and I started recording every year after that under CDM. And my biggest project was The Vampire's Revenge. So after The Vampire's Revenge, it wiped us out financially. It was a very expensive project. It was a two CD project. I had 15 musicians on it, small groups, big groups, larger groups. I did all the writing, but it wiped me out financially. And so, but then I was fortunate enough to start to record for other companies. And for the last 5 years, I've been recording for Unseen Rain Records, and they've been great. Every kind of project I say I want to do, they say let's do. So right now I have a new record called Me, Myself, and I, because I have three projects ready to be recorded, but because of this pandemic, I really don't want to go into studios. I'm actually afraid of getting sick, and I just don't want to do that. I can't take that chance. So in about 2005, I made a demo of my original tunes, and I went to my friend Marty Dornier, and he has a studio on the east side. It's a small little studio, and I said, "This is what I want to do, Marty." And he says, "Okay." So what I did was I brought two guitars, two acoustic guitars, one a 6 string and one a 12 string. And the reason why I call it Me, Myself, and I is because when I'm playing rhythm or chord changes, I can play bass lines. So it becomes like two instruments. And so I would record the rhythm track with the bass lines, and then I would record over it. And then I also did some things where I would take fours with myself. So I had to keep all of that in mind. And the hardest part was keeping it in time without a click track. And we did it. So I had a great demo. We mixed it, and I just put it on the side. So when this pandemic came along, after doing my last record, uh, Eight Hands, One Mind, Eight Hands, Mind, which we recorded here in my apartment, we couldn't go into the studios. So I said, why don't I call Marty? Why don't we remaster this thing and put it out? And Marty says, yeah, okay, let's do that. And then I submitted it to Jack DeSalvo, who owns UR Records, Unseen Rain, and he flipped. He says, definitely, let's do that. So I wrote the liner notes, and we put it out. It came out last week. Now, I have three other projects ready to go, but I can't. I have an organ trio which I want to dedicate to Pat Martino, who was a very close friend, and it's all original music. I'm not playing any of Pat's tunes. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a Pat Martino copy. I have my own way of playing things, my own way of writing. So that's what I'm going to do. I have a new string quartet with added drums, guitar, bass, cello, and drums. I have all new music ready to record called The Doctors. And the reason why it's called The Doctors is I had two bouts of cancer, one in 2005 or 6, and they saved my life, and I beat prostate cancer. Then 2 years ago, I came down with glandular cancer, and and one doctor says, you're not going to live through this. But I found an oncologist who says, I can save you. So between all the doctors had and the operations and the chemo and the radiation, I'm alive. And I've been in remission for 2 years now, almost, no, a year and a half. And so I decided to write all new music and dedicate it to the doctors who saved my life through the years. And each piece is named after a doctor. And it doesn't say doctor so it just says the name, Liederman, Grace, no, Constantino. And so each piece is all new music. I find it very, very interesting music. It's very difficult to play. Of course, I don't hold back when I write, and I make sure My part is as hard as everybody else's. I don't skimp on that. I really believe in doing that kind of thing. Uh, so those and I have another record ready to go, and I'm supposed to record with Susan Alcorn, and we just can't do it, and there are no gigs. So I'm surviving by teaching. I teach a lot. I teach online, and I have students all over the United States, including Hong Kong. And I found a way of doing it so it works for both of us, the student and myself. And the truth is, I enjoy teaching. I love giving back because it was so hard for me to learn on my own that I try to make it as easy as possible for them by giving them all this information. And I have PDFs, I have videos, I have my own ways of doing things. I take books that people work out of and I've kind of like rewritten them so it becomes more interesting. And if you have any questions, I have time. So go ahead, just type them in. So somebody said, Dom is cool. Thank you. uh, I, I am very fortunate to have a lot of friends on Facebook, in real life. Unfortunately, this year, two of my close friends passed away. And that was really hard. And my wife's best friend passed away. And my cats passed away. We have new cats now, and that's a whole new trip. They're running all over the place, and they're great. Uh, and so every day I practice, I write, and I teach. I'm teaching 5 days a week. And mostly my writing has to do with advanced students because they're doing chord melodies. And for people who don't know what that is playing a melody to a song using the chords. But this is advanced harmony based on my writings. So it's fun to do that because by the time I was 12, 13 years old, my guitar teacher, Joe Janelli, was giving me chord melodies. And I was able to sight read these things. And it was really, he was great that way. I can't thank him enough for doing that for me. And chord melodies, a la Johnny Smith, there's not too many people who do chord melodies anymore. It's kind of like a lost art, but Jack Wilkins does it. I do it. There's a friend of mine who's great at it. Carl Barry does it. And, and a couple of well known guys do it. Uh, right now, I'm going blank on the well known guys, but it's a great way of improving yourself and treating the melody. One user says, "How am I feeling?" I'm actually feeling really good. Uh, I uh, I get up every morning. I make sure I get enough sleep. That's one of the things because the chemo really knocked the hell out of me, and result of it, I have neuropathy in my legs and my right hand, which really bothers me a lot. But I'm working on it, and it's getting better. And I'm playing every day, and that's what's important to me. I play every day. I practice every day. I write every day, and I teach every day, and that's what I have to do. That's what I have to do, and it keeps me young because the truth is, I said I started at 7. I'll be 79 in 8 weeks. I'll be playing 72 years. That's a big deal. I got a hey. I don't know who's saying hey, but hey back. uh, so if you have any really questions about music, my playing, harmony, theory, my teaching, just go ahead and ask. I'm here for that. Okay. So I have a thank you from Gail for having me on this, and I thank her very, very much. Uh, and so I let me see. She gave me any advice to younger musicians. This is one of the questions. How are you coping with the why are your guitar what are your guitar influences? Thanks for the positive review of my CD 15 years ago. Okay, my influences. So I said when I was 14, my first influence, of course, was Johnny Smith. And after that, whoever the popular guitar players were, Mundell Lowe, Jimmy Rainey was amazing. I sat and watched Jimmy Rainey. I was 16 years old with my mouth open. Uh, Jimmy Rainey, Mundalolo, Kenny Burrell. Kenny Burrell, went to see him play, and he played Will You Need. I went out and learned that tune immediately. And it's been part of my repertoire forever now. I love that tune. And I've approached it so many different ways. And it's a great tune. A friend of mine took me to see Monk, and that changed my life. I watched Monk. Of course, he did his little dance, and but he did "Don't Blame Me," and he only played the melody. But every time he played the melody, he played the melody with a different harmonic sequence, and I just said, I have to learn how to do that. I mean, this is incredible, and I did. I learned how to do it. I put in the time. Let me tell you, every day, hours of figuring out harmony and theory, because in those days they weren't teaching it, and a lot of them didn't know it. The piano players knew it, but it was like a big secret. They knew it, and it was up to you to find out. And I did. I found out. And you're welcome, Steve. I just got to say that Steve said I gave his album a positive review. Steve is a great player, uh, and I'm very happy that he's a friend of mine. Uh, Now, as far as guitar influences, I told you all the guitar influences, and I'll tell you a really quick story. I have a friend, John Ruda, and I met him when I was in high school. He was a former member of the John Adams Big Band, but they had a big band party at the end of the year, and I met John. And from that time, from the time I was 15 and a half, we played together for many, many years. Uh, And of course, like everything else, we both went our separate ways. But every time in those days, when you played a gig, no matter what it was, you could take a jazz solo. It's not like today. Everything was pop today. So John, I would play, and Johnny would turn and says, "You sound like Kenny Burrell tonight." And the next gig, he says, "You sound like Johnny Smith." The next one, "You sound like Wes." And every time I get on a gig, he told me I sounded like somebody else. You sound like Tal Fowler. So because these were my influences. So I decided it's got to stop. I'm going to stop listening to guitar players, and I'm just going to get into other players. And I did. And I eventually ended up being a big influence, John Coltrane, especially when he did My Favorite Things. That was like what he did to the harmony and how he soloed on it. I said, I need to learn how to do that. And I put in hours upon hours. Then Eric Dolphy. Then, of course, going that route, eventually I ended up playing free, and because that's the only other place you can go, just like John Coltrane. The only other place you can go is to play free. Now, what I do is I like to do that on tunes. I like to change the harmony and get a kind of freedom expression to it, but it's kind of like inside out playing, and it's fun, and and you have to be creative to do it, to not to sound the same all the time. That's the hardest part. Okay, any other questions here? Okay, okay, I think there are no other questions, but the creative process, I try to tell my students, I have to teach them. I don't believe in scale playing, but they have to start somewhere. So they have to start with the scale and then take it from there. And then I explain to them and I show them and I demonstrate how scales are not music. Intervals and passing tones make music. And changing tonal centers makes music. John Coltrane and Eric Dolphy could do that all day long. You take a C7 chord and you can play every note that you would consider wrong, but there's a way of making that work. And I've been doing that since the 70s, and it's great fun, and I love doing it. What advice did you receive from an older musician that? Okay, the advice I got two things. One was from a friend of mine who was a few years older. He said to me, "You have to introduce yourself to your instrument every day," and I believe that. Then another older musician. His name was Harry Shepard. He lives in Texas now. Harry, when I started playing with Harry, I would sit there with my mouth open. He was so creative, and it was so incredible. I said to him, Harry, how do you do this every time you play? It's great. And he says, every day, every gig is Carnegie Hall. Wow, that was something. And because I would have a good day, I would have a bad day, a good day, a bad day. That hit me right between the eyes, and that showed me the light. Every day is Carnegie Hall, so you have to be on your best all the time. And one of the things that a lot of bands, what they do is their first two tunes on the set is their warm up tunes. I don't believe in that. I believe once you get on stage, the first tune, you go and you play your best and you hit. And a lot of times I'll play a tempo that's ridiculous just because I do it, because I can do it, and to show people that I'm there and I mean business. And another piece of advice uh, Joe Janelli gave me about making it, he says, you always have to be ready. And he was right. You always have to be ready. In those days, in the early days, people were still getting discovered. But around 1970, 75, that kind of thing kind of stopped. You had to go out and get it yourself. And you still have to get it yourself. And big record companies really aren't signing anybody unless a Wayne Shorter brings somebody to Blue Note and says, sign this guy. Or George does, George Benson does it. That's the way it is nowadays. A lot of people, they're producing stuff on their own, you know? And if they're lucky, they'll get radio play and some gigs, but right now, there are no gigs. What I give the advice I give the younger musicians is stay on top of your game. Practice as much as you can and constantly learn because it's a voyage. You never stop learning. That's how I feel. Every time I pick up the guitar to play, it's a voyage. Where am I going? What am I doing? And I learn something every day. And I learn from my students every day. I learn how I have to teach a certain thing because they're not getting it. So I have to change the approach. It's a challenge and I love it. So I think that's about it. I'm not sure if time is, I have 3 minutes left. So if any other questions, go ahead and ask. My website is www.domminassi. You can get sound bites from all my records. Uh, since I started recording again, I've done like maybe 30 records since then. And it's great. I mean, I wish I had 100, but I don't. But there will be more once all of this craziness ends. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really, really do appreciate it. Uh, be well, be safe, and be healthy. This is Dom Minasi signing off. Thank you.